Hello, everyone. It's very exciting to be back. And this has been rusted on for me to preach this week for quite a while. And then suddenly it was like, oh, you're first one back. I thought, oh, it's a bit of pressure for you. It was also quite stressful this morning because the last few times I've preached, I've only had to worry about what I look like from here on up. And I was wondering if I could get away with wearing pajamas and Ugg boots on the bottom half. But I thought, just in case, I'd get dressed. And sadly, my trousers, which I haven't worn for a year, are a little bit tighter than they used to be. But anyway, great to be back. Now, as you know, we are in the middle of this series of sermons called The Story, where we're looking at the whole story of I guess, the whole of history, from right at the beginning when God created the world, right to the end and what's going to happen. And unfortunately, I've got the bad news today. So next week, Jared gets to land the plane with the second coming, which is all good news. And it's all, whoa, Jesus is coming back and all bad stuff is over. But my title for the sermon today is Crisis. Now, we know from reading the scriptures that bad things are going to happen before the end of time. And so this is where we're up to. So strap yourself in, crisis. So as I was reflecting on the idea of crisis today, I was thinking, sure, we will be facing crisis at the end of time, and there will be crisis that happens then. But crisis isn't just something that will happen one day off into the future. Crisis is something that happens now. And it happens, you've probably experienced crisis in your life. And if you haven't experienced crisis yet, then I'm very excited for you and happy for you. But I have to tell you that it will happen in your lifetime, whether you like it or not. And actually, I think that understanding crisis in our life is really important. Because when I think about my friends who I grew up with in the church, because I grew up in church, a lot of them, when they reached a certain age, stopped coming to church. And one of the reasons why they stopped coming to church was because of crisis. Because something happened in their life and it wasn't what they expected. And they went, hang on, where was God? God wasn't there for me. I expected God to come through for me in this crisis, and it didn't happen. And so I'm out. I'm done. And so actually, I think understanding God and his view of crisis is really, really important, because otherwise we can have misunderstandings of what God is and how crisis happens, and that can really rock our faith. And so that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at, yes, end time crisis, but also personal crisis and how it affects us. Now, this is a big topic, okay? This is not an easy answers, right? There's no happy answer of, oh, bad things happen, but it's all okay. But as you know, if you've heard me preach before, I'm not someone to shy away from the big topics. So let's dive in. Okay, so Jesus predicted that crisis would come at the end of time. And one of the most famous passages where he talks about the crises that we'll face in the end of time is Matthew chapter 24. And hopefully we'll have the text up on the screen. I'm going to read a section from Matthew 24, which sets the scene of, I guess, the stuff that's going to happen at the end of time. Do we have Matthew 24? Here we go. All right. Starting from verse 6. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen before, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Does it sound familiar? There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Sounds like Melbourne on a regular Tuesday. All of these are the beginning of the birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the rooftop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be a great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, there he is out in the wilderness, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Okay, lots of stories of crisis. I hope you're feeling excited and looking forward to all of that. Throughout history, ever since actually Jesus returned, his people, the Christian church, were looking for this second coming. In fact, on the year 1000, so many people thought that Jesus was going to come then that history shows 20,000 people left their homes and fled up to the mountains thinking this was it, the second coming is here. One excerpt I found from a guy called the name of Hydatius. Now, he was the bishop of Aquae Flavia, and he wrote in 469, he wrote in his chronicle, my firm belief that humanity is living in the end times, marching towards its certain doom on this day when Jesus would come back and the world would end. And he predicted specifically that Jesus would come back in 27th of May, 482. So that was his prediction. The painter, Italian painter Botticelli, who actually painted some of the Sistine Chapel, he's overshadowed by the fact that Michelangelo painted on the ceiling, but he painted some of the sides. He actively believed that he was living in the final days, and he predicted that the millennium would begin 3.5 years from the year 1500, so 1504. And he told everyone that's when this will all happen. Even Martin Luther, who we all think of as a great hero of the Reformation, he said many times that there's no chance that the world will last any later than 1600. Why am I telling you this? Well, because we've always lived in a time where, ever since that we believe that, okay, Jesus is going to come back really, really soon. Even in my own family, my grandmother debated when she got engaged whether she should actually get married and have children, because she was so certain that Jesus was about to come back. And that verse there that you read, that it would be terrible for pregnant women, she thought, maybe I shouldn't get married just in case that we have to run to the hills. I'm very grateful that my grandmother did get married and did have children, because otherwise my mother would not have been born and I would not be here today. So thank you, Grandma. So we think about this. If you were to ask someone on the street what's going to happen at the end of time, this word is in the common vernacular, the idea of a apocalypse of biblical proportions. You might have heard that expression. We think that the Bible tells us all about apocalypses, which is a terrible calamity that will happen at the end of time. However, the word that we use, apocalypse, the way that we use the word apocalypse now, actually doesn't mean at all what it meant in the original Greek. The word apocalypse is original Greek word, and it does not mean the end of the world. Okay, now you might think, hang on, that's a really big claim. Don't worry, I'll back it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a text in Matthew chapter 11, except I've changed where it says the English word on the screen, and I've put the word apocalypse in because that's the word that's in Greek in the word behind. In Greek, it's apocalypso, but yeah, it's the same thing. So Matthew chapter 11. Verse 25 to 27. At this time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and apocalypsed them to little children. Right. So if Jesus was willing to apocalypse a little child, then it means the original meaning of the word apocalypse is not terrible. Okay, that's really important because you wouldn't think that Jesus would do an apocalypse to a little child if it was something terrible. Okay, so he apocalypsed them to little children. Yes, Father, verse 26, for this is what you were pleased to do. Verse 27, all things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father. And no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to apocalypse him. That's now, for those of you who are familiar with this text, you might know what the word is in English that normally your Bible translates apocalypse to. It's the word to reveal, okay, or to uncover. The word in Greek, if I was to invite you around to my house for dinner and I had lots of food on the table and I covered it all with a tablecloth and I said, you're not going to see what we're going to have until we sit down to eat. We sit down to eat and I whip off the tablecloth and da-da, there's my wonderful cooking. That would be an apocalypse. I have apocalypsed the food to you. Not because my cooking is terrible. That's my revealing of what food that we have to eat. That's what the word means. It's a revealing, it's a revelation. Now, of course, when we think of the book of Revelation, that's actually what it means, right? It's an apocalypse, except we think apocalypse, crisis, end of time, okay? The book Revelation actually means the revealing, the uncovering, the showing you of things that you didn't know before. It doesn't necessarily mean end of the world and it's all going to be terrible. I'll give you another example quickly. Galatians 1 verses 12 and 13. This is Paul speaking to the church in Galatians, and he's talking about his experience here. Galatians 1, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. Verse 12, I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by apocalypse from Jesus Christ, by revelation from Jesus Christ. He's referring there to his encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. He's there going off to serve God, to do what he believes is absolutely the right thing to do. He was committed to serving God in his belief that he must kill these new believers, right? He wasn't being evil. He was trying to do what he believed was right. And yet an apocalypse happened to him, a revelation. Suddenly, he took, like, if you think of the Matrix, and I know that's maybe showing my age, it's like you take the is it blue or red pill? I forget. You take the right colored pill and suddenly you see the world as it really is, okay? This is what the word apocalypse means. The word revelation means that we see the world around us and we're confused. We see the world around us and it's not clear to us. Where's God? How does everything work? And then suddenly we have a revelation and it's like our eyes are opened. It comes from outside of us. Now, this is not the same as us like working it out ourselves, right? An apocalypse is an external thing. It comes from God. God is the one that apocalypses us to make us go, we get it. We see things clearly. So I wonder in that context if any of you have ever had an apocalypse, a moment where you've gone, I get it, right? Suddenly things are clear. But does God tell us everything? If we're to read the Bible and read the book of Revelation cover to cover and we're to study every single verse, can we know absolutely everything that's going to happen? Do we have it all figured out? Do we know the answers? Well, some people think that absolutely, if we study hard enough, we'll figure it out. But I absolutely love this text from Revelation chapter 10 and verse 4, which says, When the seven thunders spoke, I was about to write it, but I heard a voice from heaven say, seal up what the seven thunders have said and do not write it down. Okay, so we know actually that John saw more things while he was in vision than he actually put in the book of Revelation, right? He saw more things that he was told, don't tell them that bit. All right, and so we don't know everything. We don't know exactly how the world will end. We don't know all of the answers. And actually, I think that's one of the warnings in the Matthew 24 section, that sometimes there'll be people that will say, I figured it out. I know the answer. Come here. And I've read a verse that I'm interpreting this way. And I want to tell you that it's not possible to know all of the answers. We don't know exactly what will happen. We see through a glass darkly, Paul says. We know some things, but we don't know everything. And that's important to remember. So when we think about the way that revelations will come to tell us about how the second coming will come, sometimes it helps us to understand how they coped with the revelations looking around how the first coming would happen, all right? So if you're a person waiting for Jesus to come the first time, living in the time of when Jesus was born, you had all of the Old Testament and you had lots of prophecies. Now, it's easy for us because we read the prophecies in the Old Testament and then we see how Jesus fulfilled them. And we go, oh, that makes sense. Yep, we see that this was fulfilled and then this is how Jesus made it all happen. Perfect. Brilliant. Yep, we've got it. But when you don't know how this is going to turn out exactly, and all you have is the prophecies, it can be confusing, right? And that's why so many Jews that were actively looking for a Messiah didn't recognize Jesus. You would have thought that they should have all got it. They should have all gone, you're the Messiah. Fantastic. We've got it. But one of the reasons why they didn't get it was because they had read the prophecies and they had perceptions that weren't actually reality. They had expectations of how things would go. And then when things didn't go that way, they went, oh, hang on, this isn't what I thought would happen. Now, what did the people think at that time? Well, they thought that Jesus was coming, the Messiah, to restore the kingdom. Like that was what they had signed up for, right? They had this great people under King David and King Solomon, and they had this great nation, and they were doing everything like they were being the people of God. And then obviously it all went wrong. They went into exile. And then here they are at the time of Jesus. They're living in the promised land, but they're under captivity. They've got the Romans over them, and they're looking for the warrior king, like King David, to come in and rally the troops and kick out the Romans and give them back their people. That's what they were looking for. And that's not what Jesus did. So at the time of Jesus, the Jews had expectations of how it would work. I want you to think about that word expectations. Got a bit of a silly example about expectations for you. When I was a kid growing up in my house, there was myself and my two brothers, mum and dad, 5 of us in the house. It was always dad that took the bins out. No matter what was happening, like the day that I remember waking up in the morning and he would come into our bedrooms and he'd say, oh, have you got any rubbish? I'm taking the rubbish bins out. And he'd always take out the bins. This was back before wheelie bins when, you just had to put your big bag out on the footpath and they'd come along and hand pick them up. And he'd always take the rubbish out. As we got older and sometimes he would go away, he would say to my brothers, taking out the rubbish, this is something we do. We don't let your mum do this. This is the boys' job, okay? Now, we weren't a particularly sexist family, but that was something that, it was the boys' job. And my dad took that very seriously, and he always put the bins out, and he taught my brothers to always put the bins out. Mum never, ever, ever put the bins out in my family. So some of you know that in my 20s, I got married and divorced, and while this isn't the purpose of the story, I remember that just got married, came back from honeymoon, moved into our house together, and it was the first rubbish bin day. Now, I'd been living on my own for some time, and I'd taken the bins out fine when I lived on my own, okay? And I said, oh, it's rubbish bin day tomorrow. Can you take the bins out? And he went, well, why can't you put the bins out? And I said, well, I can, but, we're married now, so isn't it your job? and he's like, well, I thought you were all about feminism and women being just able to do everything men can do. And I said, well, of course I can put the bins out, but I just sort of assumed that you would put them out because that was how it worked in my family growing up. He's like, no, you can put your own bins out. And I was like, oh. And now this is quite a silly example, but I remember that it shook me because when we've been going through like pre-marriage conversations, we've been talking about, big picture expectations, like where do we want to live? Do we want to have children? Like these big things. We'd never had a conversation about who puts the bins out. Like, what's your expectation? But I remember being really rattled by that and really thinking, hang on, this is my expectation of what a marriage should look like, and this is not happening. And I remember it really upset me. Now, stupid example, I know, but think about your own expectations. Sometimes we have expectations that things will go a certain way. Maybe you've started a new job and you've got really excited because you think this is the perfect job in the perfect company and you're super excited. And then you get there and maybe the boss is a bit crazy and, is a bit of a control freak and treats you badly. Maybe there's a bully in that workplace and you think, what am I doing here? Like, this isn't what I expected. Maybe it's a friendship where a person who you trusted and has let you down, something changed in the way that you engage with that person. And expectations, when people don't follow through in the way we expect them to, it rocks us. It really, really rocks us. And coming back to what I said at the beginning, I think this is really super important to understand because if we have expectations of how God will come through to us, and it doesn't come through that way, then it can rock us and rock our faith in a serious, serious way. So when I look at the Old Testament expectations, and then I come to the New Testament, the first character you find in the book of Matthew is a guy called John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist was called, and he had this vision, and he had this passionate commitment to create, paving the way for the Messiah. And this wasn't just something he did for an hour a week on his Saturday mornings, right? This was his full-time, he jumped into this full-time. He's out there, he's preaching, he's eating his, locusts and wild honey. I mean, he's a dude, right? He's out there and he is calling people, the kingdom of God is here, repent, the kingdom of God is here, and people are being baptized, people are being converted. He's out there preaching. He committed his whole life to preparing the way for the Messiah. And where does he end up? Well, he ends up in prison. And you kind of go, well, hang on a second. He committed his life to serving God, to preparing the way for Jesus, and he ends up in prison? Surely that's not the plan. And there's this really, really interesting story in Matthew chapter 11 where he's in prison. Now, imagine him there, and maybe he's thinking, well, there's Daniel in the lion's den. Maybe the prison doors will open up and suddenly I'll get out. Or, maybe there'll be some miraculous restoration for me because I believe in those things. Maybe he was praying for that. And this isn't happening. He's stuck in prison. And so he sends his disciples to Jesus. Matthew chapter 11, verses 2 and 3. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples. Next verse. Oh, we don't have verses 3 as well. Sorry. When John was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" Now, it's a really powerful moment if you think about the life of John the Baptist. He's having his crisis right there. He's in prison, and he's not just saying, "God, why are you not coming out for me?" He's actually sent people to the disciples, to the Messiah, to say, "Are you actually the Messiah? You're not kicking out the Romans. You're not doing what I was expecting. I dedicated my whole life to this cause, and it's not happening the way I thought it was going to happen. Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" It is this tragic question. I don't know if you can sympathize with John the Baptist. Have you ever had these moments where you've said to God, "God, look at where I am in my life. Are you really God? Like, is this really where I'm supposed to be? Was this person really supposed to die? Was this person really supposed to get sick? Or was this problem really supposed to go this way? You know, I think this is a really important question to answer right now, because so many people in wider Christianity believe that if you're a good person and you live a good life, then God's going to protect you and nothing bad will happen to you in your life. I don't know if you've heard that before, but there's only one problem with that belief, and that is the Bible. If you actually look at the Bible, that doesn't happen. Being a Christian is great, okay? You can encounter so many wonderful things and encounter God and who God is, but being a Christian does not protect us from crisis. And that's really, really important to get our head around, because if we believe that as Christians we'll go through life and nothing bad will happen, then you will be headed for disappointment. You will be headed for crisis of your own, where you, like John, will be in your pit and you will be sending a message to Jesus going, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? We don't actually see John the Baptist in the story again. The next thing we're told is that he's beheaded. So that's just like an awful ending to his story. We don't know if when the disciples went back that he goes, okay, I get it, or whether he died in this crisis. Like, we don't know what happened. I'd like to think he got past it and he was just having a bad day, but the Bible doesn't tell us. But this is an amazing example of someone who can commit their whole life to serving God. And in that moment of crisis, in the end, you question and you go, really, God? Is this the way that it was supposed to turn out? Look, this was not just a view that's common in modern Christianity. It's a view that was held in Jesus' day as well. Think of people who said to Jesus, oh, that guy's sick. Whose fault was that? Did he sin or his parents? Like, you know, we seem to have this idea that bad things happen to us if we don't follow God correctly. But if we're just a good Christian and we pray enough and we do the right things, then God will protect us from suffering. But that's not how God's kingdom works. For some reason, the kingdom of God is an upside-down kingdom. We're told that we win when we lose. We're told that the least is the greatest. Jesus' greatest victory was to die. Everything seems so counterintuitive. Think about Matthew 5, the Beatitudes. We struggle with some of them. Blessed are those that mourn. We don't want to be mourning. Blessed are those who are persecuted. No, we don't want that either. Like, we don't want the suffering. We don't want the crisis. Have you had a John the Baptist moment? God, why? This is not what I expected. Why did this happen to me? We as a church have been very, very good at looking at the end of time. As a name, Seventh-day Adventist, Adventist is so key to our identity. We absolutely believe that Jesus will come back. And you, if you've been around the church for a while, you will have heard lots and lots of sermons of what's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that any of them are not true, okay? I believe that we know a huge amount about what's going to happen at the end of time. But I also would like to warn you that if you are too fixed in what you think will happen and it doesn't happen that way, you're going to have a crisis of your own. As per that text in Matthew that we started off with, the love of many will grow cold, it says. There will be a shaking in our church community. And I think the shaking will come because of misguided expectations, because we have an idea that God will be the God that takes the bins out. And God doesn't take the bins out, and we go, God, this isn't what we signed up for. We see through a glass darkly. We don't have all the answers in this life. Crisis is coming. But I want to invite you today to put your trust in the God who holds the future, whatever happens. We serve a God who is faithful, even when it doesn't make sense.